It was a chilly evening in the city park, the kind of evening when the world feels both alive and lonely at the same time. Children were running around, their laughter echoing across the playground, but one little girl sat apart from the others. Her cheeks were wet with tears, her small hands clenched tightly around a stuffed toy that looked as worn out as she did. To anyone passing by, she seemed invisible, just another child with troubles nobody had time to notice. But not to Daniel. Daniel was a single father in his early 30s, wearing a faded janitor's uniform from the elementary school down the street. He had just finished his long shift and was heading home with his young son, Liam. Life hadn't been kind to him. His wife had walked away when Liam was only 2, leaving Daniel with nothing but unpaid bills, broken promises, and the enormous responsibility of raising a child alone. He worked double shifts to make ends meet, and most days he came home too exhausted to think about himself. Yet, despite everything, he had a gentleness about him, a heart that hadn't hardened against the world. As Daniel and Liam passed the park, Liam tugged his father's sleeve. "Daddy, look, she's crying." Daniel stopped and looked over. The little girl's sobs were quiet but heavy, the kind of tears that spoke of loneliness deeper than words. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if approaching would frighten her. But then, seeing no adult nearby, he knelt down a few feet away and reached into his pocket. Daniel carried an old bottle of bubble solution everywhere. It was something he and Liam used during breaks when the world felt too heavy. Sometimes, he would tell Liam, "The world looks brighter when you blow your sadness into bubbles and watch them float away." Now, he uncapped the bottle, dipped the wand, and blew softly. Tiny, shimmering bubbles drifted through the air, glowing against the fading sunlight. At first, the little girl ignored them, still clutching her toy. But then one bubble floated down and popped on her nose. She blinked in surprise, her crying pausing for the first time. Liam laughed, chasing the bubbles, and soon the girl's lips curved into the smallest, shyest smile. Daniel blew another stream of bubbles, bigger this time, and soon the air around them was alive with floating rainbows. "See," he said gently, "sadness doesn't last forever. Sometimes it just floats away." The little girl giggled softly. It was the sound of a heart beginning to heal, if only for a moment. She wiped her tears and whispered, "Thank you." Daniel's heart softened. He didn't ask where her parents were, he just wanted her to feel safe. But before he could say more, a voice rang out. "Sophie, Sophie." A woman ran toward them, her eyes wide with fear and relief. She was elegant, dressed in a tailored coat, her hair perfect despite the frantic look on her face. She dropped to her knees, hugging the girl so tightly it was clear she had nearly lost her mind searching for her. "I told you not to wander off," the woman cried, her voice breaking. Then she looked up at Daniel, who was holding the bubble wand, his son at his side. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. They were eyes filled with gratitude, and something unspoken. Over the next few days, their paths kept crossing. The woman, whose name was Claire, turned out to be a successful entrepreneur, a woman who had built her life on strength and independence after losing her husband in a tragic accident. Sophie was all she had left, but Claire admitted that grief had left her struggling to connect with her daughter. Sophie had withdrawn into silence and sadness, and nothing seemed to reach her, until the bubbles. Claire invited Daniel and Liam over for dinner one evening, wanting to properly thank them. At first, Daniel felt out of place in her beautiful home, with its polished floors and expensive furniture. But as the evening unfolded, something unexpected happened. Sophie laughed more than Claire had seen in months. Liam found a new friend. In Daniel, he found someone who listened. Weeks turned into months. What began as a simple act of kindness grew into a bond between two families who had been broken in different ways. Daniel showed Claire that healing wasn't about perfection, it was about presence, about small moments of joy like blowing bubbles on a hard day. And Claire reminded Daniel that love could still exist for him, even after betrayal and loss. But life wasn't smooth. Daniel struggled with insecurity, believing a janitor could never belong in the world of a woman like Claire. Gossip began in the community, whispers that he was after her money. Claire's business partners warned her to be careful, fearing her reputation might be at risk. For a while, Daniel pulled back, retreating into his shell, convinced that maybe kindness wasn't enough to bridge the gap between them. One evening, though, Sophie fell ill. It was Daniel who stayed by her hospital bed all night, blowing bubbles softly to keep her calm. Claire arrived at dawn to see him slumped in the chair, exhausted, holding Sophie's small hand in his own. Tears filled her eyes as she realized this man, with all his flaws and struggles, had given her daughter something priceless: safety, joy, and a father's love she thought Sophie would never feel again. When Sophie opened her eyes and whispered, "Don't stop the bubbles, Daddy Daniel," everything changed. Claire knew then that love didn't come wrapped in wealth or polished titles. It came in ordinary acts of kindness, in resilience, in the courage of a man who had nothing but still gave everything. She reached for Daniel's hand, her voice breaking. "You've healed more than Sophie's heart. You've healed mine too." From that day on, their lives intertwined. The janitor and the entrepreneur, the widowed mother and the abandoned father, two children who found joy together, and two broken hearts that discovered love could be reborn. Daniel still worked his shifts, still carried his bubble bottle everywhere, but now when he blew bubbles into the air, he wasn't just teaching his son or Sophie to let go of sadness, he was reminding himself of how far they had all come. And so, what started with one act of kindness in a park ended as a story of family, hope, and second chances. A single dad's bubbles healed a broken heart, and in the process, changed all their lives forever.